my phone. I'm gonna do it on my phone.
Oh my gosh.
So
we're gonna continue without her since she's being difficult. Okay, so this Wellness Wednesday, we decided to bring together some amazing panelists who are doing just solid work in the areas of justice and equity in their lanes, which are all diverse and different. So I'm going to first have everyone introduce themselves, and I'm going to call people out because otherwise everybody just stares and blinks and nobody volunteers. So I'm going to call everybody out, and then if you could please just one, introduce yourself, what you do, and then why you're passionate about equity and justice work. Okay, so we'll start with Pooja.
Man, you have to make me first. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here on this panel. Pooja Bhatt, and let's see, what do I do? So I am a consultant, which is really probably the best professional decision I've ever made, which is to work for myself. A huge privilege so that I can make sure that my work is aligned with my own values. So the work that I get to do is really helping organizations understand and assess the culture of inclusion in their organizations, and to help create pathways for implementable next steps to make organizations anti-racist. I also help organizations create internal policies and public policies that are equitable as well. So that's kind of what I do, and why I'm passionate about, what was the question? Why I'm passionate about something important?
Why are you passionate about equity work and just social justice work? What drives your passion?
I think my first gut response was, I'm a human, and I think it's a just thing to do to care about other humans, and recognizing that the policies that this country have adopted intentionally over the history of our nation's founding have been very intentionally exclusive. And so it's my job as a fellow human and a self-identifying Indian American to help to destroy those racist policies. So that's my personal calling.
Okay. Who's next?
Saida.
Great. So you all might have seen me last week. I'm Saida Segovia Taylor from Chicago, born and raised here in Chicago. My mom's from Colombia. My dad's from Honduras. I'm the executive director of Organic Oneness. I have been doing this work not intentionally. I just don't like people seeing, I don't like people being hurt, or, so I didn't know this was a career path. But I ended up getting my master's in community development and social justice, so that I understood best practices around the country, and understanding frameworks and, stuff that I do naturally. There are actual methods to the madness. And so I've just been doing the work here in Chicago, working primarily in Black and Latino communities, connecting resources, people, assets, needs, and just trying to be a friend to everybody. So, and most recently, I've been trying to figure out my indigenous side. So, Colombians, I was raised knowing that Colombians and Africans, that's our mix. And then found out about the European stuff, and then realized that it wasn't a nice vacation how everybody met. It was horrific, awful past. And so just trying to understand the trauma, generational trauma, just trying to understand our interactions with each other. And whatever I find out, I just like to share it with everybody. So that's what I've been doing in Chicago, and co-creating spaces for healing from trauma and connecting with the earth.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Who's next?
Steve.
Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Steve Kelb. I am the Director of Post-Adoption Services at Holt International, which is an international child welfare and adoption agency out of Eugene, Oregon. My job is spent creating and facilitating programs to support adoptive families and adoptees through the post-adoption process, which is everything from placement through death and offspring, and just continuing to support the adoptive family, however you want to define that, which it's pretty broad. I am, passionate about justice, racial justice, and equity because, like as a human, I'd like to reduce suffering. I think that's important. But personally, like in my line of work, I think I do what I do in order to prevent. I'm an adoptee, and so I was raised by a white family in Iowa, and my family, my environment, they just weren't prepared for a person of color to be in that space. And there were a lot of challenges then that came along with that for me personally. And I do this work because I want to prevent other challenging racial experiences for future adoptees. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Steve is in my doctoral cohort with me. He's like, we have been ride or die for too long.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
We're trying to be done. I believe in us, Steve. I believe in us.
We can do it.
Hui finally joined us. I'm so excited. I'll tell you, you can go next just because you just popped in. Nobody knows who you are. And I actually went to college with Hui for a brief period of time at University of Oregon. That was our little African-American Asian connection. We had a few folks. Karita will be super excited to see you on here. So if you would like to introduce yourself and what you do, and then why you're passionate about social justice and equity work.
Thank you, Bahia. This is Hui Ong. I use he, him, gender pronouns. I'm the executive director of Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. Because of the remote working, I just want you to know, there's kids running around, there's dogs, there's things happening. That's how I roll. That's how I roll.
All right.
It is a pleasure and an honor to be in this space with y'all. We are a community-based organization that works on a wide range of issues impacting people of color around health, access to a livable space. And what we do is we build power through leadership development and organizing specific campaigns that engages our communities in meaningful participation. Environmental justice is an interdisciplinary issue that ranges from transportation, health, air quality, and we look beyond our what normal understanding of environment is, and actually look at the built environment too, right, where we live, work, play, and pray. So for me, I fundamentally believe that self-determination is a core value that our organization holds. Not necessarily representing the organization, but that's why I got into the work, was because directly impacted communities should be at the center of solutions. And how do we support folks meaningfully engage and fundamentally shift our structures where they are centered in the decisions that impact their lives? So we're super excited to be a part of this conversation, here to learn and share what we are building out and working on. And yeah, super excited to be here. And, Bahia's like amazing and great. And let's be very clear, they text and I responded. That's what happened.
Well, thank
That's
you.
right.
Thank you.
That's how you roll up. That's what we like. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, exactly. All right, Mayor.
Howdy.
Hi.
Well, hi, my sisters and partners in crime. I am truly honored. I have to tell you this. I don't care how long I've known you guys. You are little angels perched on my shoulder. I get choked up thinking about being with you here. It really does. And the question of equity, justice, and why do I belong on this panel? Is that the question? It's a
Why
really,
nobody remember the question? This is the problem with circular people. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I answered any
I
of them, Mayor. So
don't-
just
don't
you are,
know.
what
I
you
feel
do,
okay,
what
who
you
I am
do,
and what I
and
do
why you're passionate about
and why am I passionate. That's good
equity and social
because
justice.
well, and what we do and who we are might be two different things. I won't get too analytical, but let me just say that I'm from Iran, and born in Iran and raised a little bit in the UK and raised a lot in the US. And I'm a revolutionary baby, I like to say, because you see parents in the world pack up and go and reinvent yourself in different languages and different cultures. You sort of have to at some point look back and ask yourself who you are. And so in that journey, I've always found that I've been interested in the human condition and been interested in the nobility of people, and the fact that we were from the largest non-Islamic minority religion, Baha'i, and had to escape in this undignified way, and there's much worse stories than mine, seemed to me troubling. So for me, looking at the human condition through the arts has always been my passion, and finding good stories to tell has been my passion. I didn't really care whose story it was, as long as it was a good story and a worthwhile story of nobility. So when you say equity, justice, and these are very big words for people with PhDs. All I know is that there is one thing all human beings have in common, flaws and all, and that's the inherent nobility of all of us. And to me, finding ways to reach audiences and artists and looking at theater as a tool for moral reasoning and finding a way to connect to anybody who'll listen, for me was in America, the African American community who took me in, I would like to say, as kind of a foster child and said, your stories are good with us. And in 1988, I'm that old, and in 1999 in New York, I got to start the Children's Theater Company with a real look at social justice imperatives at its core. And yeah, that doesn't sound too fun, but believe it or not, we figured out how to allow children to think that they were voices of positive change and agents of healing, and that we could find stories that they could connect to and laugh with and look at our frailty and flaws, but look at a racial injustice and look at the abuse of power. Believe it or not, Yertle the Turtle is about the abuse of power, and look at climate change and look at the advancement of women. So for me, all those core Baha'i principles were deep, but I didn't have to run around with that as the label. And so it's been an amazing exercise of coming together with people of all faiths and backgrounds and looking at how we can use theater that way. Eventually, I got to also write and produce some theater for adult audiences. And one of them is recently this production of Henry Box Brown. So I like to say I also produce theater for general audiences. Sorry if I ramble.
No, not at all. One of the things that keeps coming up right now, everybody keeps saying we're in a different time. We've all, been through various phases of protests throughout our lives. Those of us with white hair, we've been through quite a few of these protests, and everyone is saying, but this one feels different. And the reason that people are saying it feels different is because so many people from so many different walks of life are participating in this. This is new for us in the sense that people who, we've never seen, that live on the other side of the globe are part of this. So what we've been talking about as a team, Joy DeGruy Publications, the work that we're doing with Wellness Wednesdays, is we were saying, well, what is it? Why is it important? What is the significance of people who are from different walks of life, particularly people of color? And this is why we brought this group together today, is just this whole idea of what is it about us coming together as people of color that we are connecting with each one of us individually. And I kind of want to hear that, because we clearly have people from different backgrounds. How do we end up here together? Why is it so comfortable for us to be together and come together? And anybody can start with, why that's resonating with us collectively as people of color.
It's so true. I have to say, I'm sorry to jump in. I'll try to keep back a little bit, but it's so true that I feel an affinity and a cultural comfort, and it's become a problem because I don't look like a people of color. I pass for white. So it's not always, working for me, but it really is, there is a lot of cultural overlaps, and I feel like I can bring up topics and ask and work out and, have ugly moments and you know, really be able to listen when I know that I'm understood too. So there is something, and it's cultural, but I think maybe y'all with the PhDs could help me with that.
You don't need a PhD. So anybody else can jump in.
Well, like you said, Joy, this is the first time that we're able to know what's going on around the world, and so we're able to see each other's stories daily, like, on our feeds on Facebook. We're like, holy cow, what's going on over there? Oh, I had no idea. And did you see this? And so I feel like, we finally made the connection that if you're not a white man, then the world is not meant for you. And so we got to fix that. We got to work together and fix it, because, being able to jump around in Chicago, I worked for Chicago Public Schools for a little while as the family and community engagement manager. And I got to go to Chinatown. I got to go to Greater Auburn Gresham. I got to go to, different communities. And it's the same thing being said. We don't have, great resources in our school. We don't have, our streets are not paved the way they should be. We don't have good libraries. We don't have the reason. So I just heard the same story, and then now I'm getting to know some of the staff at the American Indian Center and just hearing their story. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just going from community to community and hearing that. But it all has to do with, we're not white men. We don't own property back in the day when the laws were made, and finally we're getting to the truth of history because of people like you, Joy.
Yeah.
I'd like to think I had something to do with it, but
yes, very huge part.
The thing that I was thinking about too, when we were talking about this panel, is that often, because of what Saida just talked about, and also the fact that, yes, we all are human beings, we want to see each other connected, there becomes a lot of times lateral oppression because the crumbs are so thinly sprinkled that everyone's like, okay, I got to get all those crumbs for my community, right? And when that happens, there's a level of desperation that happens, that then now the people who should be aligned with you, the people who they understand more than anyone else what you're going through, are now your competition for
your competitors.
Services, those crumbs. And I was going to ask Pooja to speak on, I know this is something that we've been working on together. She actually has pulled together early childhood equity collaborative group of organizations to try to fight. And when she gave us the graph of like how much money from like the general like budget that goes towards the most vulnerable populations, like that little sliver is such a powerful image that even though I know this and I'm aware of it, when all of us got together to look at this, we're like, oh, like this is what we've been all trying to get our little piece of, this little sliver. So I don't know, can you weigh in on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think this is a great conversation, and I'm trying to find that graph because I think it's really powerful. I didn't, for the record, pull together that group. That was people who came before me last year and building for many, many years in other community-based organizations. But
we just like you the best.
What's that?
We just like you the best.
I appreciate it. I think the graph, can I share my screen or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just show the screen real quick. This is the sliver that Bahia was referring to, and essentially what this is, we're here in Oregon, okay, and the Oregon last year passed a $2 billion per year package to infuse more money into early childhood and K-12 education, $2 billion. Over the course of 2 years, every 2 years, so $1 billion per year. We did a pie chart to determine, okay, let's just talk about, of that 2 billion, how much is intentionally going to culturally specific organizations to self-determine what they and their communities need to thrive to set their young children up for success. Of that 2 billion, this little tiny little sliver. You got other early learning initiatives which are typically focused to folks who face economic barriers, but not necessarily it's not necessarily focused on addressing systemic racism, whereas this little pool is. And then you've got all these other pools that are mostly K-12 and others to backfill other funds. So this is just the pie chart that Bahia was referring to. And I think that this point about that we've been talking a lot about in terms of policy, especially related to COVID and the budget shortfalls that are forcing different governments, local government, state government, federal government to make policy decisions, budget decisions that are going to impact communities, is that for some reason, here communities of color are again having to fight for that little sliver just to keep it. When we know data point after data point, COVID's impacts, of course, on communities of color, but that's just a symptom of the overall structure that our country has created, right? That's just a symptom manifesting today. And to be sitting with this fact that we now have to use the limited advocacy resources that culturally specific organizations have to fight to retain this fund that they fought to get for 2 years, really 4 years. It's just maddening. And so I think that part of the unity is just the maddening nature of public policy and resources, scarce resources that have been distributed because the table is really dominated by white folks historically over time, right? Mm-hmm. But back to this question, Dr. Joy, that you raised about what feels different now. I have been sitting with this question a lot too, and just thinking like, what is different? Is it just words that we're saying is different? Why did the city of Portland, for example, finally decide to defund some components of police now when people have been advocating in the Black community for decades? Like, what's different? Because that shows you how easy it is to change policy. Absolutely. It takes public pressure and public will, typically with white people having the authority to put that pen to paper and to be able to change the laws, right? And so I think that what seems really illuminating about this is that white people are super important, and we need brown and Black people uniting together to kind of say, we've been saying this all along. And if we had a seat at the table, if we had the resources to create our own tables, we wouldn't have been in this position to begin with. And for me personally, I reflect on my dad reached out. I grew up in an Indian American family, like I said. In Indian culture, there's a lot of colorism. There's a lot of skin whitening cream that's used. Even my own mother tried to pressure me. I did not use it, but just that pressure has been there my whole life. And finally, my dad texted me out of the blue last month and said, "Do you think I can participate somehow to combat police brutality and systemic racism?" I was like, what? Never, my jaw dropped. It was just so personal how this is hitting home, is that somehow, like, he used the phrase systemic racism, and it's like, it doesn't matter if I've been saying it, and everything is in one ear, out another ear with it, but it just felt really powerful and like a moment of maybe we can actually change.
Wow, powerful. Thanks for that. What an amazing story. Anyone else want to add? I have another question. And if no one has anything to add, the question I wanted to ask people, just as an update for those who are watching Wellness Wednesdays, California is trying to put into place something called the Karen Act. Karen with the C, it's an acronym about folks who are, calling the police based on racially motivated reasons, white women, and that they're actually trying to put in place the Karen Act. Just as an update, because we talked about Karen needs to go to jail.
We had a Karen needs to go to jail wellness.
Now Karen is going to go to jail.
We had Karen needs to go to jail part 1. And then we had part 2 with a legal team to talk about how to put those types of things into policy. So, and look, Karen, now we got a Karen law, right?
We got a Karen Act. It's called the Karen Act in California. Karen is going to go to jail. So that's the plan. So now, the other part, that there's something that just happened that I just think we need to pay attention to. There's been a lot of conversations about it, but you know that based on the original treaties between the Native American indigenous people in this country, that they have now given half of Oklahoma to Native American population because they were granted that through treaty, and that is still in place. And of course, there's a lot of folks saying, oh my God, they're going to take, it'll be New York next. They're going to take, you know, and I just wanted to, and then the whole idea of, you know, the Redskins and the fact that Native people have been fighting this forever. They've been fighting that. And now, you know, I was listening to it on NPR this morning, and I just wanted to get a weigh in about how people are feeling about that. I mean, it just seems to be that what happened to, tragically, what happened to George Floyd has created a momentum, an energy of an awareness, which they attributed. They said, why do you think these things are changing and happening now? And they attributed that directly to the current protests and the issues, the tragic murder of course, Mr. Floyd on you know, just in front of all of us. But I wanted to talk about that whole idea that in my history, right, and for to some degree, growing up, I had a little bit of an issue around it, that Black people in this country were water hosed, or were and are lynched, you know, really were brutalized. And as a result of that, the door kind of swung open for everybody else. Now I'm seeing a very different thing, where that opened the door to civil rights policy and issues of justice. But it was Black folks with, you know, the German shepherds and the water hoses and the, you know, the beatings and all of those things. But that door opened, and it seems to me that there is more of a collective right now. There's more of a collective voice, and I want to speak to what is going on inside of our hearts and minds and spirits that is kind of calling everyone to account and making everyone accountable. Just any part of what I just said, that if you all could speak to that. If you don't say anything, we're gonna call you out.
I'm gonna, somebody say something. I haven't heard from other gentlemen here.
We got other people on there.
Steve and Huey.
All right.
We're picking on you.
Yes.
Well, I think, the reason, what I was going to say about that, just to ask, the reason I'm talking about Steve, let me just give an example. So Steve, when we were in our program, one of the things that was interesting about our cohort is we had a very diverse cohort, even though it was small in our doctorate program. And Steve will remember this because we had, I think, 3 white people who came, but they didn't decide to join the cohort or something. So we had all these people of color, like Native American women. We had Steve was the Asian adoptee. We had 3 Black women at first, then it was down to 2. We had one woman who was a quarter Mexican, and we had a few folks. We had someone from India. So we had a cohort that was extremely diverse, but it was only 7 of us. But we were like notorious. Like everybody was afraid of us. They didn't want to teach us. And we would get into a situation, like one of our friends who's from Silet's tribe, they were talking about the history of social work in Oregon. And she was like, oh, this is a post-colonial map. This isn't accurate. And she got up and redrew the boundaries of her own actual community. And they're like, oh, what to do with that? And then when Steve was talking about initially international adoption being a social justice issue, and they were like, no, it's a response to social justice issues. And we're like, no, it isn't. Because Steve said it isn't. And so the fact that we were like, it is. And we were so determined to get them off of him around saying, oh, this is what the saviorism of this institution is, a savior, kind of helping all these people. He was breaking down all the ways that it was oppressive to the folks who are involved in that system. And I'll never forget, he was like, when we're talking about children as commodities, and I was like, oh, so rough. You know, we have to think about all the fallout from that. But part of what I think helped the professor who was helping him narrow it so that he could really still, you know, kind of push the change that he wanted to change, was because all of us were like, you're not going to play with Steve like this. Like, we are going to pull up for Steve in this particular area. And the same way happened for all of us. And I think that's what I'm feeling right now. I feel like, you know, if I think about that feeling that we all felt like somebody's got our back on this, I think we've all felt like we have to have our own back because nobody has it. And now, you know, we have each other's backs because we're like, we're not going to let this continue to go the way that it is. But I don't know.
So can we hear from
Steve?
Yeah, thanks. That's I remember that like it was yesterday. It was awesome to be a part of that group. I think I think that's a big reason, Bahia and Dr. DeGruy, why this time is different, is that like people are finally convinced that the people with the lived experiences that are the experts in these systems of oppression, like people are finally starting to come around to the idea that we know what we're talking about and we're not crazy. And like getting back to the first question about like why is this specific space kind of feel so natural, having just people of color around, just chilling. I like my whole life growing up was just in a sea of white people. It was just me, my two sisters who were also adopted. And like it was the three of us represented the diversity in Eastern Iowa. I kid you not. And so for me, I felt like I was like holding my breath my entire childhood, just kind of hoping people wouldn't notice I was Asian. They did. They noticed. But I find that when I'm in a group of people of color, like I don't have to hold my breath. I don't necessarily have to, you know, they don't expect me to be one way or another generally. And I can just exist and be. And there's something really powerful about that comfort and that familiarity that is really valuable to me. And we try to impress that with our families, our adoptive families at Holt as well, that you really need to have communities of color to support you and your children, because it's really valuable and it's really beneficial.
It's healing. It's healing. And for me, Steve, honestly, you know, I really love this, right? I have always been seriously, and again, I was talking to a friend of mine. I'm actually on the phone now because I just came from fishing. Everyone who knows me knows, you know, that's what I do. So my ride or die, Rocky, I know he's watching. I know he's, you know, but we were having this conversation about heart. And, you know, I said to him, I said, you know, a lot of people don't understand our relationship, my ride or die fishing partner. I said, but it's heart. It's a heart thing. And what the way I measure my relationships with people, the people who are closest to me are the people where I feel that heart connection. And it's not real cerebral or intellectual, or it's just something you feel. And what you described, Steve, in terms of being able to kind of exhale and be yourself, when I'm with other people of color, it doesn't even matter if I'm walking down the street or I'm in a supermarket or I'm somewhere else. There is this kind of knowing. There's a knowing, there's a respect, there's an affirmation of your, you know, intrinsic, you know, worth. I don't know what to call it, but I think it is in itself healing. And I think if the more people of color come together and they start seeing those commonalities that we have, I guess probably more frightening people, you know, it will be for some folks. But I think that more than anything else, I think we get a chance to see our total humanity, our the wholeness of who we are, and I'm appreciating the folks here. I'm loving that you are who you are in your space. You know what I mean? You don't need to be somebody else for me. There was a thing that, happened in the Black community because of our own stuff and our own injuries. When there was a person, we just, had to make them Black some kind of way. You have to be Black. I want you to be you. Right. But I think because so many times we've been rejected by different groups, it was almost like the only way you could hang. And all that's kind of changed. I think that people are really honoring folks, right to be who they are. And really not only that, but embracing it. So I'm appreciating that we're different, but together.
We have some questions too.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We have some questions.
Okay, questions. We have questions.
So, and then I also want to give Hui a chance to respond too.
Absolutely.
But so first I'm going to give you the question, and then I'm going to go to Hui so you can add some points, and then we'll get into the answering the question. Okay. And we have 20 minutes left, so let's be mindful of our time. I knew you were fishing. I knew you were somewhere doing some. Okay. So someone asked, the first question they asked was, knowing all these facts and data, what can we do to solve the economic problem of resources? Of course, that's, since we will continue to vote, but what else? And another person said, do you think that this time might be different because together we are the majority now, and lived experience is shared more, especially during the pandemic? Right.
So we're going to hear from Hui, and then we'll jump into that.
Oh, wow. I want to be careful about how I articulate some of this stuff, because I think there is sometimes someone that is on the ground that works with directly impacted communities. We have to be very clear that, when we talk about like BIPOC communities and people of color communities, we are not a monolith, right?
Right.
And because of that, there actually is really like huge complexities. And I like to root it in both kind of two areas. One is like relationships and power, and understanding what types of relationships we have with different communities. I would actually push back sometimes to feel like the sense of like coming into a space where you're enter that has a ton of people of color and feel like that you're actually safe. I actually don't think that's actually the same case. Me and Bahia went to the University of Oregon. There was like a few of us. We sought each other out. We built relationships. And we really supported each other through that process, right? But it's not a monolith experience, because we all come with multi-generational traumas, our current traumas, and the way that our economic and social systems and constructs are built out has a real impact on communities in different ways. And I would be faulty to not address the anti-blackness that happens within people of color communities.
Absolutely.
It would be a fault to understand the gender dynamics, as well as how misogyny and heteropatriarchy impacts us, right? And I know this through my work, right? We are challenged as an organization. I'm challenged as a leader within the movement that is a cis male in the work, right? And I don't want to gloss over that,
No, that's
complex.
excellent.
It is really hard. It hurts. And when you've been building power for over 2 decades, really trying to transform the system, and you are met with new energy and new ideas that like is hopefully helping our communities grow, it is not easy. And I don't want us to like shy away from it, because sometimes it's too easy to be like, okay, like, yo, we're from Portland, so we're in the space, that we give the head nods, we're good, and realize that there's also this complex dynamic, and it's not easy, and it's hard, and it's grounded in relationships, and we have to work on those relationships and build trust. So that's just one piece I just want to make sure we, like, as a team or people that are working in this work, whether it be public or private sector, whether it be for a nonprofit or in education or health, those are complexities that are layered.
And history too.
And history, right? Like
different communities doing work. I know that, yes, I prefer a diverse environment. I do. I prefer a diversity of thought. But when I'm working in these spaces and I'm like, there was some stuff, especially between the Black and the Latino community, because it's like, hey, we stick our neck out here. We do all this. We get kicked in the head 5 ways. And you figure out how to do it based on what we failed at doing, and now you're doing it better and more collectively. And then there's this weird kind of like, we're the ones that took all the hits, you know, and then you can't really celebrate the successes of your neighboring community, because you're like, hey, you made that on the backs of us, and now we don't get it anymore. And so it becomes but that all of that is being fueled by white supremacy. All of it is being fueled by those systems. So it's kind of like we are playing, we're like kind of like, you know, I don't know if you saw, it's one of those movies where they like told the little things to move. They're playing the chess game. They're like, move. And so the little people are like minions. They have to move where they tell them to go. That's how it feels like we're on their board. And we're trying to be strategic, but they're still directing what moves we get to make. And so I think that when we think about collectively coming together like this is why we were talking about, there has to be unity for Black lives. Regardless, we know that everybody has complex histories and experience, but if we can't come together for the most spice of this country, this is not how you're going to treat these folks. Because again, I always say, if you really focus on, you try to take a Black child or an old, any dynamic that you're facing, and you add a little Black onto that, and their life becomes exponentially worse, right? Then we say, if we really aim to serve that person well, everybody's gonna. If we really aim to serve poor Black children with disabilities, all children, white rural children in Oregon are going to benefit from that intentionality and that time and thoughtfulness. And so it's super important for all of us thinking about this. And it's not an either or, but we definitely have to be, when we see something critical like that, doesn't matter if we have had a history. And I know with Koreans and African Americans in the hair care industry and all these little places, people have all these feelings and issues that they've had. Still, we have to blanketly say Black Lives Matter, and this is not going to continue on my watch. And so that's, I mean, people who are here are already about that life, but they also have impact in their communities. And so we just wanted to put everybody out here to say, nobody's hiding from it. Nobody's hiding from it.
And I wanted to say something about generational stuff as well. Puya, am I saying her name right?
Yeah.
Puja.
I'm sorry. Yeah. My first introduction, sorry. When you talked about your dad, right? And I just recently, I have a student that that's from India, and she's from the Dalit, right? So she's from the untouchable caste, and she's, working on her dissertation. She just blew my mind about her being able to utilize my work to work with her community. And when she showed me where, I just was humbled by what I saw. Not people living, just homeless, but literally living in the garbage. People who are unable to go outside, people who are routinely beaten and raped. And I'm listening to her saying, thank you, Dr. Joy, for your model, because now I'm able to help my people. I was speechless. I had no words. I didn't have any words. And I appreciate the statement about those dynamics within our own groups that say we got to take care of us. Largely, everyone has been told so long as you're not, engaging with Black people, you're gonna be okay, right? Black people are the ones you got to just avoid under every circumstance. But if we really start looking at this and understanding, someone asked a question about economics. Again, economics has driven all of this. We have to begin to recognize our power economically as groups. We have a power. If we combine that power, we just basically going to say this is what needs to happen. But we have been just based on these systems that have separated us out and have us, like Bahia, you were saying, fighting for the crumbs. We're fighting for the crumbs because they're still pulling the strings on everything, and then wanting to get a pat on the back for all the great things you've done. Again, you've ravaged everything. Now you've thrown a few crumbs out there, and we're we just have to really be bow down. And I think that we do have to take a look at the fact that cooperative economics and understanding the whole idea of self-determination, and recognizing that if we just leaned in just a little and said, you know what, I can't buy into what my group has said about that whole group. That's that lateral kind of, oppression that we do. That's all manipulation as well. And we can't allow ourselves, hence we can't tell our children to adopt those same views. And the good news is I see those things changing tremendously. I see that happening where even young children are like, that doesn't make sense. And we know for certain they're not going to do the same stupid stuff. They're not. And so I think all of us in our silos have to begin to look at what we can do to foster, this whole idea of collection, a collection of people coming together for a mutual end, where we all are going to ultimately benefit when we stand in solidarity. So that what I don't know. One of the questions was, I don't remember the second question. Either.
Can
Mary wants to say something. Go ahead, Mary.
Am I allowed
Okay,
to?
Yeah,
I loved when Huey said grounded in relationships and it's going to take work, because I don't want to be the cynical one, but I was around for Rodney King trials and the Rodney King video and the Rodney King police brutality. I lived in LA just down the street, and I saw that video and I was horrified, and I thought, now it's everywhere. Now everyone's seen it. This can never, ever, will never, ever, ever happen again. And just, of course, how it turned out in the riots and all that. But, what I realized was profound about your comment, Huey, about grounded in relationships and the hard work, is really that I'm so afraid this is, God forbid, a trend. I'm so afraid that it was just, we were bored inside our living rooms and we poured out on the streets. I really hope it's depth of feeling. And I do feel, of course, I do feel that there are people that are willing to put themselves on the line. But I mean, I'm checking myself in seriously every day and as much as I can, because like right now, I'm like, okay, there are some summer camps that opened up in New York. They've got the 10 kid to 3 counselors, social distancing. This is amazing. Maybe she'll actually get some fresh air now. And I went on their website and I saw all their videos and all their accolades. I swear to God, 3 incredible camps, all white. I didn't see one person of color in these beautiful camps with the the zip line and the water fountain. I'm like, just for your freaking video, put some people of color in there. I mean, God, nothing. I'm so scared. I got a little tour going on Sunday, and I'm like, telling my husband, what do I do? There's nobody. What am I teaching my kid? I mean, listen, my kid goes on tour with Henry Box Brown. She knows more spirituals than, Baha'i prayers, but she's got friends. I real, like you said, Huey, the friendships, the relationships, those are what's important. But if we don't tend the garden, it's kind of like the weeds are there. And if you don't keep vigilant on that garden,
That's right.
it will be in your Kool-Aid. It's in here. It's everywhere. We will be drinking it, and we are drinking it. And I don't know. I mean, I was telling a friend the other day that Soraya, my daughter, had some paper dolls, and she had them. They were in different shades. We're always trying to get the rainbow and the shades of all kids and colors and races. And we're all one human race, but here's all the colors of the rainbow. And she put all the dark skin, and this is a 3-year-old. Actually, she was 4. She put all the dark ones here and the light ones here. And I was horrified. I was like, wait, you're supposed to get that at 4. And I said, well, what are the ones over here doing? And she goes, oh, they're nannies. And I was like, oh my God, at 4, she's decoded whatever she's decoded. And I'm like, but the lady that picks you up is Turkish, and the people that pick up your best friends are white. So who? And she goes, oh, at my school, all the nannies are together. And okay, so she's picking it up there. This is a progressive school. All they talk about is advancement of, in all kinds of diversity. So I feel like this idea of working hard and being grounded in relationships, like real, authentic, genuine friendships. And then lastly, I actually really wonder this, you guys are asking why now? Is there something different? I think the only thing that's different is this, I want to really understand what pupil of the eye means. I really want to understand that, but I feel like there's a knowingness in the African-American community. There is an understanding of the human condition. And I liken it to a prayer I know that says, the more you put gold in the fire, the purer it becomes. And I don't know if that's offensive or a cliche or what, but we know that adversity somehow refines us. And I'm wondering if that's the case, like the greatest humans on earth must be people of color. But there is something to this idea that the more you put the gold in the fire, the purer it becomes. And the poem goes on to say, the more you sharpen the steel by grinding it, the better it cuts. The more often the captain of a ship is in the tempest and difficult sailing, the greater his knowledge becomes. So I'm wondering if the times are different because we are, as a humanity, being grinded towards that perfection of understanding our oneness. You know what I mean? How can we let that slide?
Wow. It's pretty powerful, and no doubt, that very same analogy, very similar analogy I share with my grandchildren around the idea that the trees that can withstand the storm are the ones that have been in storms,
Wow.
and they have secured and strengthened their roots, and at the same time, all of us separately, I know for you, Mayor, and looking at what your family escaped in Iran, understanding that when I do the history, when people take my 10-week course, the introductory course, part of what we go through is we look at everybody, the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Japanese internment, the Trail of Tears, it goes on, right? Because there is a common suffering, and in some ways we have not been taught that, and I think quite deliberately. I think we've been deliberately not told our stories.
Wow.
Right? Because if we tell all the stories, we'll see our unique commonality.
Wow.
And I think that we can no longer trust the institutions to tell that story. Hence, I'm listening to everybody on here, and as deep as it is, you've got the director of this and the director of that and I'm so glad you're in those positions. I'm so glad, because we cringe whenever you meet the director. You hope to God they're tracking. You just really do, because you never know. So I'm really grateful that you're in those positions, because you're in a position to educate and to change the trajectory of knowledge, because we're not, if we're not telling our stories, and I say it all the time, we've got to write our own narratives, and we have to know each other's narratives, because then we can appreciate, then that relationship you're talking about, that everyone is talking about, then those relationships, again, they dispel the myths. It dispels the myths that we're so different. And it dispels the myths that I need to separate myself from you. I was talking to my friend today and saying that, Einstein, he makes this statement about the delusion of separation. Now, Einstein arrives at this notion of connectedness scientifically. It's not religious. It's not philosophical. He's saying everything in the universe is connected, and your problem is you're delusional in thinking you're not connected. Now, again, he's coming at it from a very different vantage point, but we arrive at the same realization that we are all connected. And if there's nothing that has happened in this COVID, is we are damn it connected. Okay? I don't care where you are. I don't care how much money you have. You better put a mask on and sit down. I don't care who you are. And that's something that we all have a common connection with. As I look around, of course, I'm in a car and I'm watching people riding bikes with masks, and I'm watching people from every walk of life. And yet we fail to see our commonality. When are we going to get it? What is it going to take?
We don't know each other. I will say that I had no idea until I had an intimate, regular interaction with Steve, the Asian adoptee story. I knew what I thought. I knew that, and I remember one time we were talking about, because I was thinking, like, and working with people who are have adopted from like Africa and different places. I've done a lot of support of work with those folks, and they're like, this is what we do to try to keep them connected. This is what we try to do. And when I was talking to Steve about having this person one time present, he's like, that person does it too well. And that's not the norm. He said, this forced idea that I have to value something that has been foreign to me all my life. And somehow you said you can't take someone to PF Chang's every weekend and think you're giving them some kind of Asian experience. And that's not going to help your child. Like, I'll take him to PF Chang's. And the whole idea of understanding that people have to have their own, like what he said, we have very complex issues within our communities, our own trauma and healing that we have to work on so that we can be part of the whole. We talked about that. And this is kind of what we talk about when we talk about unity with white people. We start talking about how when you have this lovely orchestra, and if I think about the orchestra analogy and the fact that periodically the strings meet, the wind, everybody meets separately so that they're harmonious in the entire orchestra, not because they think the strings feel like they're better than the brass or whatever. It's not that. It's because to hone your skills in your own space is super critical for the unity of sound, right? And what I'm saying is for the communities of color, we have a certain through line that is that we have been oppressed through these systems of white supremacy in multiple, various, multi-generational, all kinds of ways, right? But
colonialism, sure.
Right. We have a time right now, an opportunity to say, we need to get ourselves healthy in our communities so that we can be part of a greater whole of communities of color, so that we can, with all of our collective lived experience, being valued by one another and not cutthroat and stab in the back and all that kind of stuff, forced the larger systems, we're being forced to be reckoned with, because collectively we are the majority.
That's right. Absolutely.
So final thoughts, people. We have 2 minutes. Any final words? Maybe we should do a prompt for the final closeout. Mom, final prompt.
Final prompt. Where do we go from here?
That's not hard at all. Okay, everybody.
Let me frame it a little better. Where do we go from here in reference to working together collectively? What do we do to start working together more collectively?
My 2 quick second responses: be gentle with each other and hard on the issues.
Yeah. Nice. I would say take a deep dive into each other's history, let's learn about each other's stories, each other's pain, and how colonialism and everything has impacted each community.
Wonderful. I like that. I like both of those.
I would add also just know your own people's history and how your own community has positioned itself closer to whiteness, and understanding the nuance and complexity of what that means for you and your position today as a person of color who might not be Black, but has also benefited from white supremacy and what that role is now. And speaking to that question earlier about what do we do to solve the resource problem? I would say it's that reflection and organize. And that goes into the solidarity of organizing as communities of color to pressure the system to change the policies.
Nice.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to say that I agree with everything that's just been said in these last moment thoughts here. I think the only thing that I would add is just to be willing to extend grace and have some patience with everyone. I know that I'm not an expert in just about every field except for the one that I work in. And so when I'm asked to be supportive of a specific movement or cause, I'm really undereducated in a lot of those things, but I want to help. But I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to trip. And as long as we're willing to extend some grace to people that you understand that, their intentions are good, their impacts might be challenging, might be harmful, but their intentions are in the right place. If you can, help nurture them and bring them along and coach them up to a place where they're an asset and a real ally, then I think grace will go a long way in that mission.
I would say that in addition to all of those things, that as it was stated before, it's complex, but we also have to be able to be willing to be uncomfortable. We're going to be uncomfortable through this process, and that discomfort, whatever it is worth it. The discomfort is worth it in the end. Because what I say to people everywhere I go, even when I speak, I say, please stay in the room. Please stay in the room. I know it may get hard. It may get challenging. It may even, affect you mentally and emotionally, but please stay in the room, because if you don't stay in the room, we can't solve it. We can't fix it if you leave. So we've got to get to the point where we realize that it's worthwhile to stay, to learn, to listen. And that's not just in terms of folks on the outside of our group, but the folks that are inside of our group. We've got to learn to feel some discomfort around things, all of us, intraculturally within our own group, not just the folks that look different from us. We have to learn how to begin to deal with some of the hard issues that we're facing within our own communities and within our own families. This time is dividing families. It's like civil war in some cases, where families are that divided in terms of what's going on in the world. So these are tough times, and we've got to, we got to stay in the room, and we've got to do the work, the hard work, because what I would say to everyone on this call, someone paid for you. Someone paid for you to be here. Someone struggled and suffered for all of us to be here, and they didn't leave the room. They stayed in it. They leaned in it, and they did the deep dive. So that's what I would say too, is to not to try to to move away from that discomfort. It's inherent in the growth process.
My word is just tell the truth. Stop lying. See what it is. Stop lying. Stop pretending you don't know. We know that you know. So stop to tell the truth. And for me, yeah, this is keep it 100%. You're not where you need to be. You know where you want to go. We're not going to high five at the finish line if you're not willing to run the race. So for me, okay, let's just be real. I love you. I can have grace and compassion, but tell the damn truth. Stop lying. Stop lying. Lying. Okay, Mayor, we didn't hear from you. And did we hear from Saida yet? No, we did. We need to hear from Mayor.
I don't like, I want to quote a playwright, South African playwright, Athol Fugard, wrote amazing plays about the South African experience and the apartheid. And this is not that deep. It's actually kind of cute, but he says, none of us knows the steps, and there's no music playing. And it doesn't stop with us. The whole world is doing it all the time. Open a newspaper, what do you read? America's bumped into Russia, England's bumping in India, rich man into poor man. Those are big collisions. They make for a lot of bruises. People get hurt in all that bumping, and we're sick and tired of it now. It's been going on for too long. Are we never gonna get it right? Learn to dance life like champions instead of always being just a bunch of beginners at it. And I like to believe that we can get the dance right. And I like to believe that we can get the music right.
Wonderful.
Love it.
Love it.
This is so sweet. You guys came through. I was like, can you come through like in a couple hours? My people are like, yeah, right?
Yeah. It was so wonderful.
Yeah, I was because of you, Bahia. Like, I'll just be very real. You like
look at that, Dr. Joy.
What happened to Joy?
We have good homies. We keep everybody who's cool. So I'm telling you, we make
I'm
it happen.
so happy. I'm so glad to know you all are there. Now I know where to send people.
Are we off the air now, people?
No.
Huh?
Oh Lord, I took notes. I took more notes on you guys. I'm like going to go to your websites. I'm going to look at your stuff. There's such incredible language.
Well, that's the cool thing. Nobody in here is a punk. We all are going to come up. Read something. And nobody's scared. We're running. We are going to come up.
That's right. That's right.
We like, don't come for Steve. We got Steve's back.
No, we got you. We got you.
We got you. So.
It's just a phone call,
So
you need
cute.
some backup.
Wow.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Love
So
you all
fun.
Bye.
so
Such
much.
an
It was
honor.
wonderful
Thank
meeting
you.
with
Mwah, mwah, mwah. Thank you.
Bye bye.